This next sermon in our Who Are We and Why Are We Here series may come off to some as sounding a bit storybookish, but I'm a grandpa and that's sometimes how I explain things. I can do that. When God the Creator drew up God's plan for existence, God knew that conflict on coexistence would eventually arise among the souls in God's cognitive thinking angelic community. Remember, God knew exactly how this story was going to play out before God started. It was all in the blueprint. Remember from previous sermons that at this point in existence, the universe has not yet been created. None of it. It's just heaven with God and the angels and their heavenly community. What were God and all the angels doing in heaven at this point, and for how long? How long is irrelevant because at this point there wasn't any way of physically measuring time. There also was probably no reason to physically measure time at this point. Using our measurement of time, this angelic community may have existed for hundreds of thousands or hundreds of millions of years before the universe was created. It's also possible that the angelic community may have only existed a few years before the creation of the universe, or maybe even a few months. There's just no way of really saying. What was the angelic community doing? They existed as a community of cognitive thinking souls in spiritual form, learning about life and existence as intelligent individual thinking beings. And of course, they were also learning about love. They were also thanking, worshiping, and praising God, their Creator, for giving them life. Just like we do, the angels have feelings and emotions. Cognitive thinking souls have feelings and emotions. Other than that, what were the angels doing? I don't know. Angel stuff. So now, to answer the question that has been troubling humanity throughout its entire existence. Why did God create Satan? God didn't. God created Lucifer. Did God know that one of God's angels would rise up and form a rebellion? Absolutely, God did. Did God know it was Lucifer? I'm sure it didn't take God long to know. But doesn't God know everything? Of course God does. But it was all in the plan of existence. God knew that one of his angels would rise up and rebel. But God made all of his angels cognitive thinking souls. They all had the ability to think for themselves just like we do. The truth is, God created Lucifer. Lucifer chose to be Satan. Hence, Lucifer created Satan. Lucifer, by Lucifer's own choices decisions and actions became Satan. But if God knows everything, didn't God know when God created all the angels at once which one was going to evolve into Satan? That would be the logical assumption. I'm sure that if God knew, it was a secret that God kept. So if God knew from the very beginning which of his angels was going to become Satan, then why did God allow Lucifer to rise to such a high status among the angelic community? What was happening was all part of the plan, part of the original blueprint, and to be straight with you, some soul had to take up the role. God created all the angels at once, and all of them as independent thinking souls, just like we are. God did not create Lucifer to be Satan, even if God knew as soon as Lucifer's soul was created that that was the soul that was going to evolve into the role of Satan. God created all the angelic souls at one instant. Instantly, they were all there. Lucifer's soul just happened to be the one to evolve into Satan. But again, remember, Lucifer made his own decisions. The soul that became Lucifer and evolved into Satan was still an instant random choice, not made by God, but rather by fate. This is the reason why all the angels were created at once. This is how God wanted it to be. It's all part of the plan. Could God have chosen the one angelic soul to be the rebel? Yes. But that would not have made the entire plan work right. God knows what he's doing. The soul had to be random, and this is how God did it without being biased. Suppose you took 10 white rocks, painted one of them red, and put all of them into a non-transparent bag. Then you mixed the rocks in the bag. Then you stuck your hand in the bag to see if you can pull out the red rock without knowing which rock was the red one. See where I'm going with this? Did you pull out the red rock? Well, that doesn't matter because that's not the point. The point is, you are playing a game of chance with yourself, a game of fate. So again, this is my best way of describing how God created all the cognitive thinking angelic souls at once, or instantly. This is how God allowed them to choose which one would become and evolve into the soul that we know as Satan, without God making the choice. God instantly created all the angelic souls, and God allowed what we call fate to make the decision of which soul would become and evolve into Satan. The word Satan means adversary or accuser, or simply someone who disagrees with you. That's why I prefer to reference what happened between God and some of God's angels in heaven as a conflict and not a war. Lucifer disagreed with God on the subject of coexistence. Lucifer accused God of being wrong, so God changed Lucifer's name to Satan. God decided to no longer call this angel Lucifer, but rather to know this angel and refer to this angel as adversary, because Lucifer became God's adversary. God gave his longtime buddy and high-ranking angel a nickname, just like we sometimes do to people who are a constant in our lives and whose character and personality somehow affect our lives. Like Sleepy of the Seven Dwarfs, whose real name was Roger, but they all called him Sleepy because he slept all the time. Okay, I just made that up because I couldn't think of another example when I was writing this, but you get the point. Unfortunately for Lucifer, the nickname stuck. Before the creation of the angels, God existed as a single entity for eternity. Our time begins when God made God's blueprint and implemented the first step in God's plan. Before this point, there was no timeline because there was no time to calculate. Eternity has no time. Our creation starts in heaven with the creation of God's blueprint and then the creation of all the angels at once. The creation of God's blueprint and then the angels is the birth of our timeline of existence. This is the point when we can start calculating our time of creation. When this conflict arose in heaven, Lucifer, now Satan, created the first sin. The Bible and other ancient texts that support this hypothesis, I might add, describe the scene like this. 1/3 of the angels, including Michael, sided with God and agreed that God was correct on the subject of how to coexist. 1/3 of the angelic community sided with Satan and believed in what Satan was saying. The final third of the angelic community was unsure and undecided. If you've heard this story before of three sides arguing of how to coexist, well, in America we call it Republicans, Democrats, and Independents. God knew that everything that had happened up to this point was going to happen exactly like it did, so God continued with his blueprint. In order to show the angels, and not just the ones that agreed or disagreed with God, but all the angels, that God was correct on God's knowledge of this conflict and of coexistence and the eternal expansion of real true love, God the Creator continued creating.